Round 7, the Canadian Grand Prix. Hamilton wins, but there's one big talking point. Let's not beat about the bush, let's get straight to it. Lap 48, Vettel across the grass, Hamilton has to back out. First of all, I agree with what the stewards said, the 5-second penalty. I don't always agree with the stewards, but here I believe they got it right. And that is really, there's two factors in it. There's crowding someone off the circuit. The other side of it is the unsafe rejoin of the circuit from Sebastian Vettel. He left the track, he went on the grass, and now the rules state that you've got to rejoin the track safely. So there's two sides of it. The one I believe that Vettel commits is actually crowding Hamilton off the circuit. And when we're on board with Hamilton now, we can see, so Vettel has his slide, and there he catches it. Now there's still space on the right-hand side. After Vettel's caught the slide, there is space for Hamilton to go. So if Vettel now brings the car to the left, there is space for them to go side by side. Hamilton's already backed out of the throttle because he's not sure what Vettel's going to do. Now on board with Sebastian Vettel, we get the other perspective then. Turns into the corner and massive oversteer, massive slide. He's got the two cars ahead of him, bit of dirty air. Rear tyres overheating, that was always an issue in Canada, the temperature's really hot. So he's lost grip at the rear, he's had a big slide and he's caught it, but he's across the grass now. Remember, Hamilton is within 7/10 for the lead of the race. So Vettel knows that Hamilton is roughly there. When you're leading the Grand Prix and you've got Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton behind, you're going to be aware of his position. Not at this exact moment because he's bouncing across the grass, but Vettel will be conscious that Hamilton's about to pounce. So Vettel comes back on the circuit and there, as another reasonable oversteer that he has to catch. So he's steering completely right. Now that is purely to catch the oversteer. That's not to try and crowd Hamilton out the circuit, to be clear. But then he catches that and he starts turning left. Immediately after he starts turning left, he straightens up. Right as I pause it here, is clearly looking in his mirror to see where Hamilton is. And he doesn't, on the back of that, try and steer more left to give his rival any room either. He still keeps the wheel pretty much straight and carries on crowding Hamilton out of room. For me, he's not completely out of control at the moment. He could give Hamilton some room. He's out of control a little bit as he rejoins the circuit because he's coming from the grass with a bit of curb onto the track. If we look back at Vettel's throttle trace now, 25% throttle as he's across the grass. It's a very low amount of throttle this, but he's on a little bit. He's also on the brakes a little bit trying to steady the car. But that's not a big drama. As he comes back on the track now, he goes more on throttle as well. So he's on to about 50% throttle. And all the while he's having this big correction, he's on 50% plus throttle. And as soon as he can, he goes full throttle. Of course, it's a race. But if he wanted to leave his rival a bit more space and he's coming in out of control, he didn't need to be on the absolute maximum throttle to try and save the car, 50% throttle to save the car. He could have been on less, and that would inevitably have meant Hamilton had more space on the outside.
You know, you go through the grass and you come back, you have an amazing grip. Where the hell am I supposed to go? I had grass on my wheel.
But the stewards get all this information and they came to the 5-second penalty. I don't always agree with the stewards, we know that. In China, I already disagreed with their penalty for Kvyat. But on this occasion, I think they're right. What I will say is I would have done absolutely the same as Vettel. As soon as I saw it happen, I expected Vettel to come across the track and shut Hamilton off. It's not to say I would have been not penalised. I would have expected the same penalty. I would have hoped to not get the same penalty, of course. But if you get that penalty, I think it's a difficult one to argue with. But of course, in the heat of the moment, it's the natural driver reaction. The instinct is to you've got someone just behind you and you want to just shut them off.
Just came on the track so down.
Yeah, copy Lewis, we're on it.
Lewis Hamilton was the one that radioed in initially to alert the FIA and the stewards to say this wasn't fair. Now, I guarantee you Sebastian Vettel would do the same. Any racer, whilst I would have done what Vettel did, I also would have done what Hamilton did because he's desperate to win the Grand Prix and he's been for 10 laps really pushing. He's had some lockups, desperate to try and close in on Sebastian Vettel. So now I'll show you another incident which was Max Verstappen and Kimi Räikkönen 11 races ago, not very long ago, in Japan. This incident is really very, very similar to the Vettel one. It's a mistake from Verstappen. He cut the corner, he had very low grip as he was rejoining the circuit, he had no grip as he was off it, came back on, understeered, he didn't oversteer, he understeered, there's a difference there. But either way, it's having limited control of the car, and he forces Räikkönen off. 5-second penalty. And to be honest, most people were saying that's a fair enough penalty. Now there's a very small difference between Verstappen's incident and Vettel's incident, so the stewards here have been consistent with their penalties. There's a different debate as to whether this should be a rule in the overall scheme of Formula One, but that is the rule right now. You can't crowd another driver off the circuit and you have to rejoin safely if you go off the track. So according to the rules, it was a penalty against Sebastian Vettel. One more incident that we should talk through. Monaco, this is now 3 years ago. It's a different situation because there's one dry line at this point. Both drivers are on slick tyres, it's been wet, we've just come to the crossover, Hamilton leads the race and Ricciardo is pressing him hard. Hamilton this time makes the mistake, he locks up under pressure from Ricciardo, cuts the corner. But, if I pause it there, Hamilton's now back on the circuit, there is clearly no unsafe rejoin of the circuit. He's come back on ahead of Ricciardo, but the rejoin of the circuit is absolutely fine from Hamilton. Now this one, to me, looking back on it, is very, very tight for Hamilton. Firstly, you've got one issue instead of two. With the Vettel and Verstappen ones, you've got the unsafe rejoin of the track and then the crowding the other driver off the track. Here, you've only got the crowding of the driver off the track. So there's a difference there. You've got another difference of technically the reason that this penalty was not given is Hamilton left enough space for a car's width on the outside. Now, if I pause it here, there is maybe you could argue just about a car's width. It's not usable for Ricciardo. He can't really get his car in there, but technically maybe there is a car's width, which wasn't there clearly for Raikkonen, and it wasn't there for Hamilton either by the time Vettel moved fully across. But at the same time, we do want fair racing, and the same reason that I think Vettel was crowding Hamilton out, Hamilton is a little bit, to an extent, crowding Ricciardo out here, to a lesser extent, but he really has put Ricciardo very close to the wall. So I think Ricciardo could have a complaint here, but you can also see some logic as to why it wasn't given, whereas in the other two incidents, Verstappen and Vettel, the rules were much more clearly broken. This was not a wholeheartedly bad weekend for Ferrari. When the dust settles, yes, he should have won the race, but he finished second in the Grand Prix. He took pole position by 2/10 from Lewis Hamilton. He beat his teammate. There's a lot of positives. And Ferrari as a team can really build on this. They had, in qualifying, the fastest car. Valtteri Bottas only qualified 6th, and he's been lightning quick this year. So Ferrari as a team can take a lot of positives. They lost the Grand Prix. We shouldn't gloss over the fact, really, that Sebastian Vettel made a big mistake from the lead of the race. He drove brilliantly pretty much every other lap of the weekend. Vettel's an absolute top driver, 4 world titles, electric pace when he's on his day, brilliant pace in qualifying, does so much right, but he made one mistake, and that mistake cost him the race this time. From old Ricciardo to new Ricciardo. Ricciardo in the Renault, what a drive this weekend. Qualified 4th, exceptional. Finished the race in 6th, also brilliant. And he had a nice little fight with Valtteri Bottas on the way as well. Lap 35, Valtteri Bottas on much fresher tyres than Ricciardo, who pitted early to cover off Gasly much earlier in the Grand Prix. But Bottas, he has to work for this one. And actually what's strange about this first incident is he just sort of catches himself out, Valtteri Bottas. Ricciardo doesn't really defend either the outside or the inside. He sort of hovers in the middle, and Bottas is in two minds whether he goes inside or outside, so he completely backs off the throttle. And that means Ricciardo then has a chance to defend the inside once Bottas chooses the outside. And Ricciardo, we know he's good on the brakes, and he's getting more and more comfortable with the Renault car. He holds on lap 1. Lap 2, Bottas again chooses the outside. This time Ricciardo has DRS, he's just past the back marker, and that spares him another lap. So he has a much better speed. Bottas doesn't have a huge closing speed purely on DRS because Ricciardo has the same. Ricciardo again defends the inside. Finally, the third time of asking, Ricciardo again defends the inside. Bottas sells him a bit of a dummy to go there, but now he has got a big closing speed. He's got DRS, and look at Ricciardo's rear wing, completely shut, a lot of drag. Bottas comes through with a whopping speed. Holds the middle of the road. I think he's very aware of who he's racing at this point because Ricciardo loves a lunge, doesn't he? He's always going to throw it in on the brakes if he possibly can. And Bottas actually catches himself out with this because he's gone to the middle of the road and then he's gone in so deep because he's afraid of Ricciardo behind that he actually misses the corner in the normal way, locks up the right front, makes the second part of it really tight. But in the end, it's enough for him. He managed to get the DRS on the way out as well, double DRS in Canada. and he just extends from Ricciardo after that. So it was a subdued performance from Bottas in Canada. Finally got that move done, but my man of the weekend was Daniel Ricciardo. Haas not having a good weekend, and Romain Grosjean had an interesting battle with Sergio Perez. Let's have a look at Perez's move on Grosjean. He's got the DRS in the racing point. Grosjean knows he's there. You can see him looking in the mirrors. He knows Perez is there with the DRS, really close, and he's in a bright pink car. That helps as well to see in the mirrors. But Grosjean doesn't defend the corner. He just moves to the right, opens up the corner on the racing line, as you do, and Perez doesn't need a second invitation. Straight on the inside, door wide open, and he went for it.
To the race control.
What I don't understand with Romain Grosjean is the constant team radio when he's been passed, but the FIA need to look at it. Perez came through, and again, looking on board with Perez, it's a really clean move. Nothing in this. Grosjean opens the door completely. Perez just dives on the inside. Now, let's have a quick look at some of Grosjean's other moments from the past 3 Grand Prix, because I've been talking about him a bit. This is the one in the previous Grand Prix, Grosjean and Charles Leclerc. We covered it at the time, but look how wide Grosjean goes. Again, he opens the door. It's Monaco. It's tough to overtake, but he does give Charles Leclerc a chance, and Leclerc goes on the inside. Grosjean turns in, a little bit of contact, and that was a kamikaze move. Barcelona, he was having a really good race, Romain Grosjean, best of the rest, really good pace. Safety car changed the race for him, and now look at this one. The 2 Haas cars side by side, left the door wide open. Magnussen's through on the inside. Here's another one from Barcelona. Grosjean slipping through the order. He's been done by Magnussen, and now Carlos Sainz gets a run. He has a huge closing speed, Sainz, and goes to the inside. Grosjean doesn't defend. Sainz is there in his bright orange McLaren, another car that's quite easy to see in the mirrors. And Grosjean keeps coming across. They have a touch again. Sainz is there. Grosjean continues to turn in. And across the runoff, Grosjean goes. It's strange because I've been teammates with Grosjean in a way. I was reserve driver when he was racing at Lotus in 2015. I've heard him on the radio through the whole year, basically. I've seen what he can do. He's exceptionally quick. He's a really, really talented driver. But I can't understand at the moment. His racecraft seems to be non-existent right now. Not only is he not defending, but then he's complaining every time he gets overtaken, which is a really strange situation. He's a really talented driver. On his day, phenomenal. He will, I'm sure, pick up loads of points this year. He's had a bit of a tough run at the start. I'm sure he'll recover really strongly. But just right now, the moaning every time he gets past on the track is strange, and he just needs to get his head down and just start to defend a position if he wants to try and keep hold of a place. So Perez overtaking Grosjean in the Canada race, but his teammate had a really, really strong race as well. For me, Ricciardo the man of the weekend, Stroll the man of the race. Started 17th, but finished in 9th position, a really strong home race for Lance Stroll. This one for me was probably Stroll's move of the race. On Sergio Perez, this is before they've both pitted, a move for position. Stroll's quite late on the brakes down the inside. Now, I don't know if there was team orders here. I don't know categorically, but it doesn't look like Perez was expecting that move. He started to turn in. It didn't look like he was just making way, but Stroll was deep on the brakes and he got the car stopped nicely. On the face of it, it was a good move from Stroll passing his teammate, who didn't make life too hard for him. But Perez is a good driver. He's shown it over years, and Stroll came through. Now, this final one was the move from, he's already in the points, Stroll, 10th up to 9th on Carlos Sainz, who's desperately trying to hang on some pretty shod tyres because he pitted so early. And Stroll this time just sends it on the outside again. The Racing Point is a really quick car on the straights. The McLaren is not the quickest on the straights. Stroll with the closing speed on the outside, just still had to make it through on the brakes as well. You can see he's really fighting the car as he gets through to that first apex. And through he goes, 9th place. Tricky start to the year for Lance Stroll, but some good home points. For him, he needs to sort out qualifying. This time he was unlucky, and he actually maybe had the pace to get through into Q2, maybe even around the top 10. He was looking all right in practice, but he had that issue in FP3. But in general, he's not made it out of Q1 for a long time. His race pace has been good, so if he can just sort out his qualifying, he can score a lot more points.